Generation X is often called the forgotten generation. They are not as praised as baby boomers, not as talked about as millennials, and not as trendy as Gen Z. But psychologically, Generation X may be one of the strongest and most influential generations in modern history. Generation X refers to people born roughly between 1965 and 1980. They grew up in a world without smartphones, without social media, and without instant access to information. Instead, they grew up with uncertainty, independence, and rapid social change, and those experiences shaped their psychology in powerful ways. Many Gen X children were known as latchkey kids. Both parents often worked long hours and divorce rates were rising. After school, many of them came home to empty houses. They cooked for themselves, did their homework alone, and managed their own time. This created a deep sense of independence and self-reliance. Psychologically, Gen X learned early that they had to depend on themselves. They developed strong problem-solving skills and emotional toughness. They became comfortable being alone and handling challenges without asking for help. But this also made many Gen X adults emotionally guarded and cautious about trusting others. Unlike baby boomers, who were often optimistic about institutions and society, Generation X grew up skeptical. They saw governments fail, corporations betray workers, and promises broken. They witnessed economic recessions, layoffs, and social unrest. As a result, they became realists. Gen X tends to value practicality over idealism. They don't chase trends just because they are popular. They don't believe every promise or every hype. They prefer evidence, experience, and logic. This makes them cautious, grounded, and sometimes cynical, but also wise and realistic. Generation X also grew up during intense global uncertainty. The Cold War, nuclear fears, rapid technological change, and economic instability shaped their worldview. They learned that nothing is guaranteed and that life can change suddenly. This created a strong survival mindset. Psychologically, Gen X developed resilience. They learned to adapt rather than complain. They learned to work hard, save money, and prepare for uncertainty. Many of them value job security, financial stability, and personal independence because they experienced instability early in life. One of the most unique traits of Generation X is their relationship with authority. They tend to question leaders, institutions, and systems. They do not blindly follow rules just because they are told to. They value personal freedom and autonomy. This anti-authority mindset led many Gen X individuals to become entrepreneurs, creatives, and independent thinkers. They prefer flexible systems rather than rigid hierarchies. They respect competence more than titles and experience more than reputation. Generation X is also the bridge generation between the analog world and the digital world. They grew up with landline phones, handwritten letters, and physical books. Then as adults, they adapted to computers, the internet, and smartphones. Because of this, they often have a balanced relationship with technology. They use digital tools, but they remember life before screens. They are less likely to be addicted to social media compared to younger generations. They value face-to-face conversations and real-world experiences. Emotionally, Generation X tends to be private. They don't overshare their feelings publicly. They often use humor, sarcasm, or silence to cope with stress and pain. They value privacy and personal boundaries. But this does not mean they are cold or unemotional. In fact, many Gen X individuals feel deeply and are extremely loyal to close relationships. They just prefer to express emotions selectively and privately. As parents and leaders, Gen X often encourages independence. They tend to give children and employees more freedom, expecting them to take responsibility. They value results, competence, and accountability over rigid rules. They dislike micromanagement and prefer trust-based systems. Generation X is often described as the silent backbone of society. They built companies, adapted to technology, raised millennials and Gen Z, and kept systems running during massive social transitions. Yet they rarely seek attention or validation. Psychologically, Generation X represents quiet strength. They are survivors, adapters, skeptics, and realists. They don't chase attention, but they shape reality. They are not loud dreamers, but they are practical builders. In a world obsessed with trends and viral moments, Generation X reminds us of something important. Resilience, independence, and realism are powerful psychological tools. They are the generation that raised itself, the generation that adapted to everything, and the generation that quietly built the modern world.